You have produced all three of these films, and you were the one who you and your partner brought them to, brought a script to Garry Marshall of Valentine's Day.
Yes.
When was that?
Well, what happened is a writer named Catherine Fouget had just seen Love Actually, and we were working with her on another project, and she came to us and said, "What do you think about doing Valentine's Day like Love Actually?" And we thought that's a great idea. A lot
Right.
of different stories, emotions, and so we started developing it with Catherine. And after we had the script, then we brought it to Gary, and that would have been early 2000s.
Now, does he have, and in the case with this one too, does he always have the writers on the set with him if he comes up with something? Or also does he talk to the actors if they have ideas too? How does that work?
It's a great question. So he's always writing. He's always writing, and he has two, sometimes three writers with him right behind him at the monitors, constantly pitching him ideas. He's
Oh my
got
gosh, really?
it's fascinating. One writer, Marty Nadler, has been with him since I think The Odd Couple in the '70s, and is retired in Martha's Vineyard and comes out of retirement for every Gary movie, and he just sits behind Gary and he just pitches him jokes. And if Gary likes it, he puts it in his pocket. If he doesn't, he throws it right back at Marty. So Marty's doing jokes, and then Gary has a few other writers who are writing more of the scenes and structural stuff, but he's always writing. And I remember on Valentine's Day, it was maybe the first week of filming, and I'm on set, and Gary comes driving up in his car. He gets out and he hands me some pages. He says, "I just thought of this last night. I'd like to do them." And we were like, okay, so we're scrambled, but there's new roles and new characters that weren't cast that are working
New
in 5
roles, new
hours.
characters.
Like
It
a
wasn't
line or
just new
two.
dialogue. It
It was
was, oh my,
as a joke.
right.
And we're like, okay, let's do it. And I said, but who's going to do it? He goes, oh, I already have the guys. They're coming. And then the next day, new pages. And then we realized he's always rewriting. He's always adding stuff and throwing out little jokes and little scenes, and it works.
Now, the decision on Mother's Day, once Valentine's Day was such a big hit, was there an idea to do a trilogy then? Or was it after, let's do one, let's do, New Year's Eve, and if that does well, let's go for a trilogy? How did that work out?
Well, you know how it works, as everybody in the room knows. You start working on a movie, and the first week you think, oh, this is pretty good. And then the third or fourth week you're thinking, this is really good. And by the end of the movie you think, we've made Gone with the Wind. It's just that you've put your heart and soul into a movie, and you just give up so much, and
Right.
you just feel you've made a great movie. So by the end of Valentine's Day, we were feeling pretty good about it, and we started talking on the set with the studio execs at New Line. If this does well, what would the next movie be? And we kind of came to the conclusion that it should be New Year's Eve because that's a movie that's universal, has universal themes, and also would play well throughout the world. So the minute the movie opened and did well, New Line put that idea into development. And then on the set of New Year's Eve, we were thinking what would be the next one if this does well, and we were kind of thinking Mother's Day would be the next one.
And how does that work then? Because I know some of the writers are actually in the movie. The one guy is the clown, is
Yeah.
one of the writers. Was it almost immediately that Gary and you and writers sat down, because I guess he's worked with those guys a lot, sat down and decided to throw out ideas?
Well, actually, there was a script we had gotten from a writer named Lily Hollander that Gary had optioned. And then he hired Matt Walker and Tommy Hines, who are kind of his writing partners now, to come up with more ideas. And then Matt, Tommy, and Gary wrote another script for Mother's Day, which was great. And then we brought in some more writers, and then a woman named Anya Cacha-Fermano finished it and did a great job. And then Matt and Tommy on the set were rewriting as well. So it was a long 4-year process.
Was there any, was it personal, a lot, some of these stories, when the writers were thinking up ideas? Did they also go, from their experiences on Mother's Day or with their mothers?
Oh, I'm sure. And the way we do it is we pick the holiday, then we come up with as many storylines as we can. So there were 4 central storylines in this movie, but we probably had 10 to 15 that we had talked about before settling on these central ones.
Because you don't have 4 in the, I think you had more in Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
What was the decision to, not only to just do 4, but also it's the week leading up, and then at the end, everybody meets up on on Mother's Day. What was the decision to kind of change the format a bit?
That's a good question. We thought we didn't want to do the same thing. We just thought the audience were going to expect something a little different. So we were thinking that let's focus on fewer storylines and let the audience really kind of get their teeth into a smaller amount of storylines, and then it would also allow us maybe to get bigger stars because they had more meat
Right.
to work with. So that was one idea, and then in terms of not having the movie set on one day, again, we just want to do something a little different.
Right.
So we said instead of setting on one day, let's set it on the week before Mother's Day to give us time to play out stories in a different way.
And the first two movies were New Line, and this is Open Road. So you kind of went in more of an indie route in this. What was the decision behind that?
Well, the business has changed
Right.
pretty dramatically. Now a lot of the focus is on the tentpole, movies, and this is not one of those obvious tentpoles. So the best way to get this movie done was to do the indie route, which was to pre-sell foreign, find a state that had a good rebate, and kind of back into it. And
But I
that's
thought
how we did it.
Atlanta worked really well for this. I mean, because there were neighborhoods. The city looks very cosmopolitan, but different than New York and L.A. Did the actors and everybody find working there enjoyable?
Oh yeah, and I think every actor in the movie had already been there two,
Right, I
or 4, or
would
10
imagine
times
by
in the
that.
last few years working on movies. But we hadn't really set the movie in the script anywhere. It was just a kind of Any 10 USA, and we got there, and after the first week, we started thinking, why don't we just have it be Atlanta? It's a great city, and it looks different, and it's in the South. We had L.A., we had New York. We thought the third one should be in a different city anyway. So it was really the first or second week we just committed to Atlanta, Georgia, and just set the movie there, and we think it works creatively.
Also, going from beaches to, Pretty Woman, Runaway Bride, and now, with this, he's known for female-centric characters and, strong characters. Was that also one of the reasons, too, you could get such a terrific cast of, Jennifer Aniston's new to the repertory company, but Kate did Raising Helen, and then she was also a little girl on the set of Overboard. And of course, Julia, this is the fourth film they've done together. Do you find that when you say Garry Marshall, that a lot of actresses naturally want to be involved because of how he works with women and that he doesn't shy away from portraying women on screen?
I think so, and I think he takes a lot of pride in the way he could tell stories for and with women. And I think it's a big draw for some of the female actresses he hasn't worked with. And I think Jen has said that it was a bucket list for her. She just
Right.
wanted to work with Garry, and she just jumped at the chance at doing it.
Also, it's interesting because Julia played a soldier in Valentine's Day, and what Common was in New Year's Eve, and then we see Jennifer Garner as Jason Sudeikis' wife who had died. The decision to have a character, a vet, in each of these films.
Well, the military is dear to Garry. He was in the armed services
Oh, that's right.
during the Korean War,
Right.
and I think it really influenced him. And I think it's you see it in his movies. It's important. He feels it's important to portray the military in the films.
I have to ask you about the wig. The decision with Julia. I remember, I guess in Pretty Woman she had a white wig, but it was sort of that. And I read somewhere that wig was also used in Notting Hill in a scene. What was the decision?
This is the gentleman I produced the movie with, Wayne Rice, and we did the last two. This is the question we've got asked a lot in the last couple of weeks. But it was Julia's idea. She called Garry up a few days before she was heading to Georgia and said, I got an idea. I'd like to wear the wig that I wore in Notting Hill, in the movie she was promoting.
Right,
her
the
character
sci-fi
promoting,
movie,
the
right?
sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
And Garry looked at the pictures online and said, that sounds good. And so Julia's rationale was the character in the movie, she's kind of hiding behind a facade, and it's this character she's created, this saleswoman, and she just thought I worked creatively for it, and Garry blessed it, and she showed up with the actual wig from Notting Hill, and a couple of people picked up on it pretty quickly in the early screenings, and then Julia told some of the press it was the actual wig.
There's also Hector was on the morning news yesterday, and he was talking about it was the scene where he's talking about his upbringing, and it's the train scene that and there's something about the fork or the spoon, and that was like the homage to Pretty Woman, and that he actually started kind of crying at that scene.
Well, in Valentine's Day, there was a scene where Julia's in the limo heading to see her kid at the end of the movie, and the driver says, have you ever been to Beverly Hills? And she goes, once. Big mistake. And we put it in the gag reel, and it was the biggest laugh in the whole movie because it was referencing Pretty Woman. So I think Garry and Hector and Julia were looking to do it again with this one, and so hence the salad fork line.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you. I hope everybody liked the movie.